successfully performs remote viewing, deactivating chips and codes or programming, raising the vibrations and healing this great planet. We are co-creating a better reality. You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.
Thank you, everyone, for being on Max Steel Show. We have a great guest, return guest, Stewart Swerdlow, and he'll be on our show tonight. And I want to thank my producer, Russ, my wife, Nicole, Vanessa. But there's somebody else here that I was unexpectedly, that came in here just a few minutes ago. And to those, because I mentioned his name the last show I did with Emery Smith at the very end. And I wonder how he got in here, but I didn't give him the number. But anyway, I'm going to mention him. Q, unmute yourself.
Q Anon.
Say hello to my audience in the Wolf Spirit chat room and all over the world.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into Max's show today. And we are very interested in hearing what he has to say, along with Stewart Swerdlow.
Do you know about Stewart?
Oh yes, I have read his Blue Blood, True Blood book back in 2000, and was very interested and captivated by the information.
Okay. So you know a lot about Stewart too.
Yeah, I do. We do keep up with him.
Okay. I want to thank you for everything that you do and what you're doing for the world and to the United States.
You're welcome.
I want you to know, why do they keep attacking the Russians? Russians have done nothing. I guess they got nothing else to do but blame somebody, because they know that they did it and not the Russians. All right. He muted himself. I guess, okay, that's all we need from him. Our guest tonight is Stewart and Swerdlow and his wife, Janet. And I want to thank him for coming back and returning. And we wanted to talk a little bit about whatever he wants. I really don't care what he wants to talk. I always give people the freedom to speak anything they want. What do you want to talk about, Stewart?
Well, you mentioned the Russians, so let's talk about them a little bit.
Let's talk about the Russians, because you are Russian.
Yes.
And I am so glad that I met. I feel like I've known you for a long time, and I feel that you are definitely a very good person, you and Janet, and you bring a lot of truth to the public, and I really appreciate that, because I like to bring the truth to the public.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Of course, not everyone appreciates truth, and everyone, there are some who have a different kind of truth, if you will. But I say what I know, and everyone can accept it or reject it, And so, you ask, why do they blame everything on the Russians? If someone gets a cold, it's the Russians. If someone gets a flat tire, it's the Russians. Why? And I've said in my lectures and in my books that the media, the Illuminati media, needs an enemy to keep fear in the public. And when there's fear, then you can control through ELF, scalar waves, and so on. So the Russians have become the new Nazis, the new ISIS, the new whatever next step that they need. So that's what's going on right now. as you know, I'm not a fan of any politics whatsoever anyway. And I don't really have faith in any government whatsoever. And it's very interesting to me after this, what they called a summit in Helsinki, that the media, well, especially American media and Western Europe media, are trashing President Trump. And of course, especially CNN, who hates him completely. And, he could say 2 and 2 is 4, and they would say why it's wrong. But, I know that Trump is also under the control of other people. And even though I feel he has done some good economically so far in the United States, I don't think he is good with people. I don't think he knows how to talk to people or to deal with people internationally. He runs the United States like it's a corporation, and it is a corporation. So I guess that would make sense. But to the American public, this is an anomaly. They are shocked because they have, instead of a president, they have a CEO, basically. See? It's interesting to me also that, for example, they had a video on today, I think on several different international news media, of when Melania and Trump met with Putin, and they're taking a group picture. And the media said, look at the fear on Melania's face. She must be the only one in the room who knows how horrible or evil Putin is. Well, I looked at that video several times, and I could not see any fear or any negativity on her face. In fact, I see a lot of neutrality with her. She is Slovenian. Slovenian people tend to be very detached, if you will. I think that's the only way she can live with her husband. And quite frankly, everything that you see on the news is a show anyway. And so Trump said that he believed what Putin said about not interfering in U.S. elections. And then the media said that he was undermining U.S. intelligence, and that he is the only president to ever do such a thing. And all that's been going on. My opinion is that the U.S. intelligence is wrong. Anyway, I know from my own personal experience with the FBI that even the information they have about me is incorrect. And so I can't imagine how much they would screw up on a much larger global nature. And in fact, when I called the records department of FBI in West Virginia and asked them to change my personal information because it was incorrect, and I needed proper information for certain international documents I was getting, they refused to change it. So that's when I said, I can see what the FBI is. They're just really, they can't find their way out of a paper bag. So in that respect, they do believe what Trump said about the Russians. And look, do you really think that the United States doesn't do this? Do you really think the United States doesn't interfere with the economies and politics of every other country on this planet? Of course they do. 10 times, 100 times more than the Russians would. Every major country on this planet does that. So, it's like going into a nursery and picking one child and saying, well, that child poops in his diaper. He's not so good. Well, they all do. You understand? Another thing that came up today was the issue of Montenegro, this little tiny country on the Adriatic coast. Janet and I were there a few years ago. Montenegro is a very popular tourist attraction for Russian people. mainly because Russia does not have very good beaches, except for maybe near Sochi. And so a lot of Russian people come to Montenegro to go to the beach. And we found it very humorous in Montenegro because the beaches are not nice. It's all full of rocks and pebbles, and it's very difficult to even walk. And the Russians are laying there like it was, the Bahamas. And I thought that was very interesting. And I read on the news that President Trump said that he did not want to defend Montenegro in NATO because the Montenegrins, he said, were aggressive and would lead everyone into World War III. Now, quite frankly, having been to Montenegro, having seen how bad the infrastructure is and how quiet the lifestyle is, I sincerely doubt that Montenegro would become any issue for anybody at any time. It's basically just a bunch of casinos and rocky beaches and very bad mountainous roads.
So say up in the mountains, a lot of sheep.
A lot of sheep. We drove from Serbia. We went from Serbia to Kosovo and to Macedonia and Albania, and then to Montenegro and so on, then Bosnia. And so, when I talk about things, it's not because I have an opinion. It's because I go to these places and I see what's there. And I talk to the people. And so that's why when I see the news or hear the news and I read what they're saying, it's bizarre to me because obviously whoever writes these things have never been there.
Well, the thing is, it's very challenging for your average person to refute it because they've never been there.
Absolutely correct.
And so because we've been there, not only do we observe, we read the frequencies.
For example, like when I read about Greenland, and it says, oh, the ice sheets are melting in Greenland, it's so fast, and the rock is exposed, and blah, blah. Well, we have been to Greenland in the month of July, which is the height of the summer, and it's covered in ice and snow at great depths. So what they're talking about is a lie. It's a fake. It's just for people consumption, so they believe in global warming and all these things which are not true. And most of the public, and I'm sorry to say, the American public really isn't that sophisticated. I'll use that word.
Well, I think a lot of it is because of the programming that's out there, which we've talked about extensively on our webinars or podcasts.
Yeah, so people just accept what they're told. The media like CNN and Fox News and so on, even Yahoo News, all these others, they tell people what to think. And when you speak to people about anything in politics or economy, they simply repeat what they've heard or read on these global news networks. They have no mind of their own. And so this is very disturbing because they're like sheep. They really are sheep being led around by a shepherd who's not very kind to them. Getting back to Montenegro, the story goes that a couple of years ago, Putin didn't like that Montenegro was going to join NATO, so he arranged to assassinate the president of Montenegro. And he was concerned because Russia, they said, only invades non-NATO countries like Ukraine and Georgia. And that's so that if NATO was part of NATO, Russia couldn't invade Montenegro. Now listen, you can count on one hand how many people are in Montenegro. It's a very small country that was a former part of Yugoslavia. Second of all, Montenegro is on the western part of the Balkan area. So if the Russians wanted to invade them, they would have to go through most of Eastern Europe, which is part of the EU. So the whole premise of what the Russians wanted to do, as far as the news, is absolutely absurd, in my opinion. So this is, again, just another tactic by global, I should say American news media, to taint the minds of the public against their new number one enemy. I think I mentioned on the last time I did a show with you that wherever I work, wherever I go, especially in Eastern Europe, but also in other parts of Europe and the world, people tell me that they prefer the influence of Russia and the administrations of Putin's government than they do with the Americans, because they said that the Americans, they cannot trust them. But the Russians, what they promise, they give them. This is why you are seeing Israel being into communication and more close association with Russia than with the United States, even though Trump has transferred the embassy to Jerusalem, and there's other reasons for why he did that, which I may get to later on. I may have discussed it last time I was on the show. But you are seeing Russia becoming very instrumental in negotiating deals in the Middle East and Central Asia, and even in parts of Europe and so on. And this is very upsetting to the American Illuminati, who are losing their influence in these areas, and so therefore have to demonize Russia so that the public turns against them. But, and today they arrested a Russian spy. I forgot her name, Maria Butina, I think, something like this. And interestingly, she's also a redhead, just like Anna Chapman, was arrested in 2010 and sent back to Russia. Now, as some of your viewers may know, I worked on when Anna Chapman was returned to Russia. Putin gave her own television network, among other things, and so I am very often on her shows. In her programs, usually she does a lot of shows about the paranormal. So I'm considered one of their expert people on this. And coming up, I have a show on her network, 2 shows, one on religious artifacts, and the other one is on alien technologies and so on. So all of this is coming up. But it's interesting to me that that happened the day after this summit to so-called embarrass the Russians. That you see, they sent even spies to Washington and so on. Now, do you really think that the U.S. does not have spies in Russia? Do you really think that the United States doesn't do the same thing, maybe times 1,000, that they're blaming the Russians to do it? I mean, it's really, if it wasn't so stupid, it would be funny. I mean, it would be like a very bad television show when you see how they act, especially on the media. So I don't know what else more I can say about that particular thing. I have gotten information just a couple of days ago from a source in Eastern Europe, not Russia, but another source in Eastern Europe, saying that there could be a war in Europe, but did not go into the details of what kind of war it would be. So, of course, my thinking was, well, is it something to do with Catalonia separating from Spain? Does it perhaps have to do with what's going on in Montenegro and this kind of thing? But in thinking about it and discussing it with some of the people, it's one of 2 things. It can either be that because it's not Russian invasion. Russians will not invade Europe. That's not going to happen. But it could be that the EU would actually have some kind of an authoritarian or military action against some nations in Eastern Europe because they won't accept the migrants. So, for example, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland have absolutely refused to take in any of the migrants that have come from Asia and Africa. So this goes against EU law and rules and regulations. And so it's possible that could be one of the things that happen. But it can also be that there could be a civil war in Europe, also involving the migrants, also involving these countries that I mentioned, because if they're forced by EU law to take these migrants against the population desire, then there could be civil war. And I guarantee you that Eastern European people, Slavic people, will not accept this. I mentioned, and again, don't remember if I mentioned on your show or other shows, but in the last year or two that I was working in Poland and so on, I was approached by people who told me that there's a movement, especially among the young people in Eastern Europe, for a Slavic or a pan-Slavic union, which would be under the authority of a new Soviet Union. It would not be the way the Soviet Union used to be, but it would be perhaps more of a benevolent version of this. And so most of the people that I spoke to in Eastern Europe, and this includes Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and so on, even Hungary, Bulgaria, they all said they don't like the EU. They are sorry they are part of it. They want to be removed from it, and they want to be under an umbrella of a Russian organization. So that could very well be what the so-called war coming to Europe may be about. I see in the chat room that there's a question, do you think that this is the real Putin or a clone? Well, this is a very interesting question, because a few years ago, I had a meeting in Warsaw with, I will say, a representative from the Polish government. And he told me that years ago, when, and he was also working in Germany for the Polish government, and I met him in Berlin, and I met him in Warsaw. And he told me that whenever they would meet with Putin, you know, Putin used to be a KGB agent in Berlin, and he's fluent in German. But when they went with the German delegation to Moscow to meet with Putin, he needed a translator. So they felt, this is very interesting, because the real Putin spoke German fluently. Why does this one need a translator? You would think, if they had replaced him with a clone or what have you, that they'd make sure this new person spoke German so no one would know the difference, yes? Well, I did a lot of research on this, and I found out that according to international law, when there is a meeting between two representative, high-level representatives of different countries who speak different languages, each one must speak in their own native language, which is then formally translated, so there is no discrepancy about what they said. So that if he was speaking in German and didn't know a word or said something incorrectly, it wouldn't be misunderstood. So he had to speak in his own language. This is what I was told. If this is true or not, I cannot verify that, but that's what I was told by this official. I have also actually been, because you know that I teach alternative medicine, and I was actually teaching an Iraqi surgeon. And this Iraqi surgeon showed me these two pictures, one of Putin from maybe 15 years ago, and another one that wasn't so old, maybe 3-4 years ago. And he put the pictures side by side, and he said, you can see these are two different people. He said, I'm a surgeon, and I know what it's like to do reconstructive surgery and so on. And he says, I'm telling you, this is not the same person. So, you know, I then spoke to a member or someone I know in the KGB. And as you know, and I mentioned on your show last time that, you know, my great uncle was first president of the Soviet Union, and his son Andrei created KGB, so I have a connection there. And so this KGB person, who's actually very, very high level in Russian elite, I will say, this person told me absolutely that this is the same Putin, that she knew him many years ago when he was an agent, and she knows it's the same person. So, to answer your question, is it the real one or a different one? You know, choose one. I don't, who knows? Because to be honest, he does look different than the old version. And so there's evidence this is not the same person. Even his ex-wife Ludmila left Russia because she was threatened if she revealed that they took the real one away and they replaced it with this one. And she now lives in Switzerland, where she says she is safe. But of course, you're never safe from that kind of thing. It doesn't matter where you are. And so, my opinion is, it could be, I don't know why they would replace him, because the first one was doing what they wanted anyway. So what would be the point of it? See, so I have mixed feelings about that. And it would not be a clone. The story I had was that it was just another person who had plastic surgery to look like him, not a clone. The clone would look more like him, and this person does not. So, again, choose your opinion, and that's what it is. So, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
About Putin
Anything,
himself?
yeah.
Well, as far as Putin himself goes, I think you have to recognize, as we've talked about before, that it is all part of the show. And because they all have doubles, they're going to switch people around, and they're going to give people things to talk about, and they're going to keep you defocused from what the true things are that are really going on. And these are the things people are going to be concerned about versus what's actually happening. So to me, it's just kind of a, what do they call it, a shell game, where they just move them around a little bit. So that's my
And,
opinion.
and it's interesting to me also because, I think it was 1995 or 6 when I actually met Mr. Trump in front of Trump Towers. And at the time he was with Marla Maples. And to be quite honest, he was a very nice and friendly person. And I was, kind of surprised how nice he was. And now, the person I see on the media is not the same person I knew or met. So I could say the same thing about him. People change, and so on. I'm not the same I was years ago either.
Or as I said, it could be a shell game.
Yeah, so, and what difference does it make? Because everybody's a puppet, and they do what the masters tell them to do, and you never see who the masters are. And so it's just a big show right now, and it always has been, really. I had mentioned on your show last time, I think, that there is a new Soviet Union. I think it already exists, but they're calling it the Russian Federation, but it's really new Soviet Union. Everybody knows this. My friends in Novosibirsk on May Day, which is May 1st. Actually, no, it was May 9th was Victory Day for the Soviet Union. It's a celebration of the Soviet Union over the Nazis in World War II. And they have parades and so on and so on. And so my friend sent me a picture of the buildings in Novosibirsk that were flying the hammer and sickle Soviet flag. And she sent me the picture, and she said, we have not seen this in over 25 years. All of a sudden now a Soviet flag, not the new one, the other one. So yeah, things are going back. The more things change, the more they stay the same, as the saying goes. And so I think there's new Soviet Union. They're already starting to incorporate. For example, just today I heard from my cousin. He's from Belarus, and his wife's uncle is the prime minister of Belarus. And so, they call Belarus the last dictatorship in Europe. My opinion is the EU is the dictatorship in Europe. And that is obvious because, you know, in the EU, the people who make the law in Strasbourg, the parliament and the EU, they're not elected by the people. They're appointed by others. So the people who make the law in the EU are not elected officials. That makes that a dictatorship. The people have no say in anything that happens there. So, you know, that's an interesting opinion by the media about Belarus, because really it's the EU that's the dictatorship. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the next few months of 2018 and into 2019. I feel that there is a very strong connection. There's a reason why. And those of you who have watched my podcast in the last couple of weeks, you know I have mentioned that just this week alone, Vladimir Putin has met with Netanyahu of Israel. He's met with the Emir in Qatar. He's met with Erdogan in Turkey and several others, yes. All in the same, within days of each other. That's not an accident. He's planning something. You know that Saudi Arabia has told the Palestinians to either make a peace plan or they're not giving them any more money. I think most of the Arab nations are fed up with the Palestinians. And my feeling is that there has already been an agreement, and Trump knows about this, and that's why he's acquiescing to Putin like this also, is because they are going to make an arrangement where there is a peace plan drawn up for Syria after they are now eliminating the rebels. Israel has already stated that they're even willing to accept Assad as the continued ruler of Syria and even have a treaty with him, as long as the Iranians are nowhere in the country. And you know that the Gulf countries, the Arab countries, and most of the countries in the Middle East, Arab countries, are against Iran. They don't like the Iranians. And so they are supporting Israel in this effort as well. So it's a very strange alliance. You are also seeing happening now Israel becoming very close with rightist governments in Europe, like Orban in Hungary, and other countries in Eastern Europe, Austria, and also Austria, things like this, where they're very actually right-wing, even considered at times to be anti-Semitic and pro-Nazi. And these are the countries that are now visiting. Orban is in Israel right now. They're aligning with Israel. So this is a very interesting state of affairs, because obviously what's the bottom line? They become a common enemy of the fundamentalist Islamic jihadists who are in Europe and other places. And Orban of Hungary says that he represents Christian Europe, which those of you who know history, in the Middle Ages and during the Crusades, Europe was called Christendom. It was the land of Christ. And so this is coming back. Isn't it interesting that all the old empires are coming back? Erdogan in Turkey is recreating the Ottoman Empire, and Orban is trying to create a new Slavic empire, and Putin is creating new Soviet Union, and so on and so on. So what I think the bottom line will be that Putin is arranging a peace plan between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Already there's, of course, you know, there's Egypt and Jordan already have diplomatic relations with Israel. But I think we're going to see in the next 6 to 9 months, this also happening with Syria, Qatar, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates already allow Israel to have economic offices in their country and allow their citizens to visit Israel. So there's a kind of a relationship there. Morocco has always had a close relationship with Israel and so on. And so we're seeing now a more conglomeration of things. I think what Putin is going to form is a Middle Eastern Union, kind of based on what you see in Europe, only this time with the Israelis and the Arabs. And that would be in the Russians' best interest, because then they have complete access to warm water ports. And not only that, I'm sure many of your listeners know that Russia is the biggest oil producer in the world. And now, in the last couple of years, Israel has discovered vast oil and natural gas fields under the Eastern Mediterranean, which they are trying to work with Cyprus and Greece to develop this. But nobody has money, of course. But the Russians said, if you let us work with you on this, we'll give you all the money you need to develop this oil. And then Israel becomes like another Dubai. And that's very good for the Russians because they control all the gas, natural gas that goes to Europe through Ukraine. And of course, since Ukraine has an issue with them, Russia, at least several times in the winter, turns the gas off. So everybody freezes to death in Europe because they have no gas coming in, see? And they're trying to create a new pipeline across the Baltic from Finland and so on. Bottom line is you're going to see an entirely new dynamics now in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. I think that both Putin and Trump would like to see the dissolution of the European Union, which so would most of the people in Eastern Europe like to see this. Even recently, with the change of government in Italy, the Italian people no longer wish to be in the EU. You see Spain breaking up, Catalonia trying to separate, and of course that will not be in the, and so on and so on. Britain breaking away, Trump telling Theresa May to sue the EU. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that the news is not reporting. And so I am seeing this new dynamics happen. And it's going to be quite interesting 6 months to 9 months, as I mentioned. Now, questions here that I see on the chat. One person write, Operation Gladio still going on. Not sure exactly what that means. Is Netanyahu cabal? Well, yes, but whose? Not the... Listen, there's information that I'm going to be revealing in September in my class here in the state of Michigan. And it involves this very question. I cannot reveal it now. But there's another cabal that is an old one, but it has something to do with Illuminati. There's another question someone has. What was discovered in the cave with the Cyclops found? Oh, yes. Interesting question. Yes, QAnon, you very good memory. I'll repeat the story for those who maybe were not here last time. 2009, I was invited by the government of Bolivia, which of course is very anti-American, to go to an area outside of Tiwanaku on the border of Bolivia and Peru, which is 13,000 feet or 4,000 meters in elevation, and to discover something, because I was told by the Bolivian national archaeologist that before the coup in Bolivia, they had been digging in the area and they had discovered a tunnel that led under a mountain. When they went through this tunnel, they found a cave, and in this cave was a cement or stone table with a 3-meter long cyclops on this in suspended animation on this table, surrounded by computer banks that they estimated to be about 15,000 years old. And when they reported this to the new government, the military junta took over, they were told to seal the cave and not discuss with anyone. And so they did. Fast forward to 2009, when I was there, I was asked with my abilities to please find the cave. And I did. I didn't find the exact tunnel. I found where it was, where they had to dig. And I was told that they will do so. Well, it's a very interesting, ironic thing, QAnon, that you have asked this question today, because just yesterday, I received a Facebook private message from that Bolivian archaeologist who said he just returned from Mexico and that he has information he needs to give me, and he will communicate with me shortly. So to answer your question, the information I'm going to be getting hopefully in the next couple of days, and then I'll be able to hopefully report on that. But this is a very ancient cave system. Tiwanaku actually was once at sea level and was thrown up 13,000 to 15,000 feet, supposedly in minutes. And that was during the sinking of Lemuria, which was at that time off what is now the Pacific coast of South America. And so the Tiwanaku city was actually an interdimensional portal, which was verified by the archaeologist. There's much alien technology and symbology there, which I reported on back in 2009. Did I do a documentary on that? I don't remember. But anyway, I will be giving updates on that as soon as the archaeologist tells me what they found. So I hope that's as far as I can go, unfortunately, with that particular question at the moment. Okay. I don't know if Max, if you or Vanessa or anyone else or Nicole have questions for me. I'm not sure where you'd like to go with this whole situation. I will say, I mentioned, I think last time on your show, about the dangers of what's going on geologically. I think I mentioned to Nicole because she's in Vancouver. Yes, she's in Vancouver.
I'm in Alberta.
Oh, Alberta. You moved.
No, I've always been in Alberta.
Because last time you were in Vancouver, I think.
No.
No?
All
right, because I warned about British Columbia and the earthquakes coming there. But just this today, there was a story about huge fissures that opened up in the Yellowstone, causing a lot of areas in the park to be closed because it's dangerous, and could even represent a possible eruption. Now, I mentioned, I don't believe it will be a major eruption like there was 630,000 years ago, when ash and rock were found as far away as the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think it will be like that, but it can be significant enough to create a very thick cloud or ash layer in the ionosphere for many years to come that will create ice age. But as I mentioned on the show last time, as I told you, I am in contact with a NASA physicist. He's been with NASA for over 40 years. And he told me that the Earth is going into an ice age, and that in the next 3 to 4 years will be the peak of the onset, which will last several decades minimum. But Russian information says the same thing, except they believe it can last 10,000 years. So according to this scientist, he says we shouldn't be worrying about what's going on in Syria or what Trump is doing, what Putin says. We should be concerned about where we're going to get food and what's going to happen when the ice cover goes down to Florida and so on. So this is what he's concerned about.
Well, a lot of people are talking about this solar event that is supposed to happen in the next, it's starting this year up until the year 2024. What do you have an opinion on this solar event that is supposed to happen? Some people are calling it an ascension. Some people are calling it a change of densities. So I don't know if you heard anything about that.
I have heard many, many things about what's going on with the sun, and none of them are true. The sun is going into a solar minimum, and when the sun goes into a solar minimum, the Earth goes into an ice age. And as I have stated many times, an ice age is the normal condition for this planet. If you look in history, and I'm talking not just recent, but millions and millions and billions of years, you will see that the Earth is mostly in an ice age most of the time, and only rarely does it warm up so that there is inhabitable zones like we have now. So in effect, we already had global warming for several thousand years, and now we are going back into ice age. And so that is what we should be preparing for. And I have shown in my podcasts and in my blogs over the years how the media and the U.S. Meteorological NOAA, for example, have falsified the temperature information and made it look like things were warmer than they really were, when in fact since 1987 the Earth has actually been cooling. And just because I find it so interesting, in the last couple of weeks on the US media, they say, well, the heat waves are because of global warming. No, it's freaking July. It's summertime, and there are heat waves in the summer, and there always have been. Okay? And if you look in the history, it's actually been hotter in the summer in the past than it has been. Look in the records for 1920s and 1930s, when the Dust Bowl created in the central United States, and it was in the hundreds of degrees for many months at a time. And so it's much cooler now and much wetter now, even though they say there's a drought in the West. I know that there's a lot of storms in the West. And someone's writing in, and how cold are we talking? Well, it's an ice age. So, it doesn't mean it's going to be, 40 below zero all year long. It means that the winters will be longer. Snow in the northern hemisphere, let's say in the United States and Europe, maybe it will start to snow in October, which does here anyway in Michigan. And it will last maybe till May. And the summers will be drier and cooler, much cooler than they are with a much shorter growing season. So it's not like you're going to have a glacier outside your front door 12 months out of the year, but it's going to be very different than it is now.
And that's why they're getting you ready right now by changing your food source. And if you watch my part of the podcast, you'll notice that I talk a lot about getting you to eat bugs and things like that, because all of these types of foods are what they can grow under the ground versus the animals and all that on top of the earth. So there's a lot of things that are going on to prepare you for changes. And that's why I'm telling you that they have you look over here while they're doing something else.
Now, there's another question which I've seen a couple of times, and I've been asked on several radio shows in the last few months. And the question is the world expanding as in growing bigger? Let me tell you what this means. According to some, I don't even know what to call them, alternative sites, what have you. Look, I have an alternative site, but I try to tell the truth, But these sites are, let's say, misguided with their information. So they are saying that the planet Earth and other planets are actually expanding in size. So my question to them is, Where is the material coming from? Because the Earth has finite material. It's not going to get bigger. So why does it look like this? I'll explain. When you look at tectonic plates, continental lines that divide huge ground masses between one another, for example, in the Atlantic Ocean, the tectonic plates of the European side and the North American side are actually splitting apart. If you go in the ocean, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is splitting apart. And so it's creating a space, and magma is coming up from underneath and filling that space, and then hardens to create a new part of the crust. So it looks like the Earth has expanded because a crack has separated and more material has filled in and is now wider. Yeah, that's on that spot. Now, move a little bit more to the west, to the Pacific tectonic plate. That is subducting underneath the North American plate. So on the other side of this, there are plates are subducting and closing underneath each other, making the areas smaller. So it's not that the Earth is getting bigger, it's, let's say, redistributing the magma underneath and filling in holes on the top and then subducting under other areas. Someone else, I heard that the Alliance have done some work over on Hawaii, and they're not going to have the destruction that was going to have. Do you have it? Listen, this is all New Age la-la stuff, okay? The Alliance and the aliens, and they're going to say, there's no one saving this planet, people. Nobody. You have to do it. Understand? If you're going to wait for the Space Brothers to come, you're going to be in pretty bad shape. This is la-la stuff, okay? No, I've heard this 4 billion times over my life, and I am a very old person, that this destruction is not going to happen, and that's it. No, listen. Hawaii is being destroyed, period. Now, I will clarify that. The magma, Hawaii is the center of what used to be Lemuria. Lemuria is now rising back up. Why? Because the subduction zones around the world are pushing, and so it's pushing up. It's making this section go up again. It's a cycle. And then eventually we'll go down in a few million years, and so on and so on. And so Hawaii is going up. And in order for it to go up, the volcanoes have to go off. And there is destruction coming. And even the United States government, and I reported this 15 years ago maybe, that stated that there will be a cataclysmic volcanic eruption in Hawaii that will create atmospheric pressure of 1.75 times normal, which will mean the Earth will be thrust up so quickly against the atmosphere that the air pressure will push down whatever is on the surface, and basically it's like it goes up and the air presses down, everything will be crushed. So I'm sorry for this person that you heard this information. It's not true. And it's a disservice to the people in Hawaii who could get off and save themselves. And then you tell them they're going to be saved because it's not going to be, and that's very bad. You know, just like the people who told the Jews in World War II, oh, don't leave Germany, everything's going to be okay. Wasn't.
And you have to also remember it's the mind pattern of the people that are attracting these experiences to start with. So you cannot just go in there and play God and fix things just because you think you can. So there's a lot of responsibility that these people who are trying to fix things and play God, that they are pulling on themselves. So there's a lot more here than what people really understand. Again, the deception.
I know that most of you maybe don't want to hear about what I'm saying because it doesn't match your love, light, and peace information, but unfortunately, this planet is not about love, light, and peace. This planet is about harsh lessons. That's why they come here, because this is like the biggest university in the universe.
And I just did a podcast called Save the Earth Programming, for those of you who watch that, which this is just something, again, it's a distraction. You're not supposed to save the Earth. You are here to take care of yourself. The Earth is here to change you.
Now, someone writes here, are the elite deliberately causing Alzheimer's and dementia in the elderly? How and why? Well, I will say to you that, first of all, background, dementia and Alzheimer's had been around long before the Illuminati. That's number one. Second thing is, if you read my work, you know that I talk about everything is a mind pattern. What you think, you will create. And so, people who have dementia and Alzheimer's have a mind pattern of fear of death. That means their body is afraid to die. And even though it is coming close to their time to leave the earth because their lifetime is over, they have a fear of death, most likely because they are worried about what their judgment is going to be. And so they are keeping their body alive while their soul personality kind of dangles outside, which is why their mind isn't there. It's just the body. That's a background information. But to answer your question physically, yes, they are putting heavy metals in medicine and food and water and so on that accumulate in the brain and the pineal gland especially, and cause blockages in the thinking processes. I will say here, so you understand, that this can only happen to people who have the mind pattern I just mentioned earlier. If you don't have a mind pattern, if you're not afraid of death, you will not get Alzheimer's and dementia.
It also has to do with people who don't want to think about their life, what they did, and besides what they were, where they're going, where they came from. So there is quite a plethora of information depending upon what the person is.
And the question, how and why? Well, I told you how. They're putting these heavy metals in the food and so on. Why? Because older people remember the way things used to be. And they can tell the younger people, hey, that's not how we used to do it. That's not how we did math. That's not the history that we learned in school when I was younger. And so they're dangerous. They're dangerous to the Illuminati because they undermine the new information. So that's why they're doing it, so that the old people can no longer communicate what really used to happen in the past and tell the truth. So they get rid of them. And that's why they want elderly people to take free flu shots in the winter that will kill them, and so on. That's the answer to that question. And by the way, that is only happening in the Western world. Russian is not doing that to their people. Eastern European are not doing that to their people. This is a Western condition, if you will.
Okay, I wanted to add, we got to go into a break right now. We got a little feedback here. Okay, all right. I was told when I got out of the hospital that I was supposed to have a test done. So they made me urine to a half a gallon container, and I returned it back today to have them check it out. And they told me that the reason I had to do that because they want to check to see if I have any heavy metal in my system.
Right.
The other thing is that I believe they're checking for something else. I think they got a small whiff of who I am. And before I left the hospital, the lab person came in, and I've never seen so many tubes full of blood. They did 12 of them. And they're saying they're checking my DNA, they're checking my my blood type, they're checking everything that might be in me. So I got a little whiff of that I think I know why they're looking. But anyway, we're going to be right back. And excuse me, I'm got a little cough here. Go ahead and take it away. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, everyone. So stay tuned.
You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.
But in actuality, there is simultaneous existence, which means that all events, all timelines happen at the same moment. And so when in Montauk they attempted to go back in time and change history, they realized they could not do this, because when you change an event or you want to change an event, it simply shifts you to an alternate timeline where that event already happened anyway. So you can't change anything. It's already there. It's just a question of which parallel universe in which it exists. And so when you hear stories, people talk about ascension and all these things, you already ascended. You are already every place you need to be. It's simply a question of what you are aware of and what you accept.
And where you focus. So if you have issues in your life, let's say I know you're going through some health issues right now. So if you think about and focus on the reality where your finger is already well and healed, and you pull that experience in, that aids and boosts that healing. But they want you to think you're dependent on a pill or a pharmacy or this or that. It's the mind is the strongest tool you have, and people neglect that the most. And that's what Stewart and I have come together to teach and share to people. This is what we have been through. This is what we have learned. And now we're sharing it so you can apply it to your life and be the best person that you can be. Rather than try to avoid your life, you run to your life, because your life has already played itself out in the eternal now.
Someone writes in a question, were there any famous or top politicians at Montauk who are still alive today, like Barack Obama, or Montauk and Project Pegasus linked? Okay, Barack Obama had nothing whatsoever to do with Montauk Project. Were there top politicians? Yes, of course. Many of them are no longer alive. Over the years, I have mentioned some of them on radio shows and got a lot of attacks for that. So, you know, are there some that are still alive? Well, you can talk about some members of royal family, for example, and other royal families around the world that maybe Americans never heard of. But insignificant meaning at this point, because even though Montauk ended or crashed in 1983, there are other projects that have developed subsequent to Montauk in other areas of the world that are ongoing. And for example, there are projects going on now in other parts of the United States, especially in the western part of Colorado, also in certain areas of Arizona. There are projects in Russia, Germany, Great Britain, Israel, Japan, and so on. So there are many, many derivations of the Montauk Project that now exists globally. Montauk was the template that initially created the protocols, and now others have picked that up and developed them in different directions. And as far as other projects are concerned, no, Montauk was unique. There were no projects at that time that existed in the same way, I will say. And so there were no links to other projects except for the Philadelphia experiment, which actually was in 1943, which became energetically linked to Montauk through hyperspace connections. They were not concurrent in time, but energetically they connected in that manner. And that's, I wrote about that in Montauk Alien Connection book, and you can read about that. And there was something else I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was, but it says, many people said the sun is not hot. Also, you have said this. Yes, I have said it. Can you explain this more in your, I guess that means opinion.
Opinion, yeah.
Yeah, someone needs to take English 101 spelling.
Yeah, there was quite a few errors in that one. I was going to fix it, but we got it.
That's okay. I'm just teasing you. But yeah, the sun is not, I want people to think about this, even though I get a lot of flack from this. When you go in an airplane, and let's say international flight, and you rise up, down, tens of thousands of feet in the atmosphere, what happens? You see on the screen, the temperature's going down. It's 30, 40, 50, 60 below zero. How is this possible when you are technically getting closer to the sun? Shouldn't it be hotter? It's only hot at the ground. Reason is that the sun is what they call cold fusion. It's just basically light. That's why in deep space, it's hundreds of degrees below zero. It's not hot. If the sun was hot, it would be hot in space. Wouldn't that make sense? No, it's the only light. And what happens when the light refracts through an atmosphere, then it heats up and reflects from the ground, and the ground becomes warm. That's why planets that have no atmosphere, they're freezing cold, because there's no atmosphere to reflect the light. So this is what happens when you are on in space like this. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Stewart,
I mean, I'm not.
I had a question sort of on the same guidelines. Now, people talk about the sun being, you know, a ball of gas, but what is your opinion or experience as far as going through more of an electrical experience and moving through the galaxy, more of an energetic electrical base?
Well, that's correct. That's correct. And I write about this, actually I teach this in a class. I have a seminar called Simultaneous Existences. And I teach that a black hole in one universe is a sun or a star in an alternate universe. This is how creation breathes in and out. Energy from one goes through a black hole and comes out through a star. That's the light that comes out through the star. It's the energy that comes out through the star. A star and a black hole are just two different ends of a wormhole or a vortex. That's what a star and black holes are.
I didn't think of it that way. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's why you can travel interdimensionally through black holes and stars. And that's why you may remember a few years ago, even recently, the NASA had a sun cam, a camera on the sun, and they would see these vehicles coming out of the sun. Remember that?
Correct. They showed
huge vehicles.
At first, they were saying that it was, you know, just space debris or something, anomalies. But there has been a few times that it looks like ships have been coming both in and out of it.
Yeah, because they are.
Makes sense. Very cool.
Yeah, and those ships are coming and going right directly to the Kuiper Belt, which surrounds our solar system. It's an area surrounding our solar system. And there's a huge massing of these vehicles, like a blockade around the solar system, coming through the sun from alternate universes that feel threatened by what's going on here. I think I discussed this last time on the show. I don't remember, but I think I did. Anyway, by the way, when there is a solar flare, this creates an energy tunnel from the sun to the outer atmosphere of our planet Earth, and literally creates a wormhole between Earth and the sun, so that you can travel from the Earth to the sun in a second. if you get in at the right time.
So would you say that the northern lights or the aurora borealis is sort of like a side effect of a wormhole activity going on?
Well, that's a very good question, but I have to give you a different answer.
Okay.
Because the Earth is hollow, and suspended in the middle of the core is molten material left over from the Earth's creation. And there are openings in the North and South Pole. And so during these certain solar anomalies, they create atmospheric conditions that allow the reflection of that molten material energy to reflect out at the poles and create the auroras.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. It
Okay,
says,
go ahead.
What is our atmosphere? I don't know. What in our atmosphere turns light into? No, it's not it's the atmosphere acts like a prism. It's like a magnifying glass. And so if you ever hold a magnifying glass over a piece of paper in the sunlight, it makes the paper catch a fire. Now you could put your finger in between and nothing will happen. It's only the light on the surface of the paper that creates the heat. So it's the same with the Earth. So the atmosphere becomes a prism or a magnifying glass that takes the light and magnifies it as a reflection on the surface of the ground and heats it up in the same manner. And then it says, so are all suns star gates? Well, that's one way to say it. I will say they're exit points. You can say that.
All right. Did you want to go back into anything more about Montauk? If there was, we kind of went away from it a little bit. If there was some information that is not really out there that maybe you would know, and on that note, I want to say how grateful I am that you made it through. That not that you came out unscathed, but we're grateful that you came through okay.
Thank you. But Janet will question that okay part, right?
It's always a struggle, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a difficult person, you know. I joke about it, but Janet does think it's funny when I say I'm a quadruple Scorpio Russian Viking.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So you don't want to know what happens when I get angry. You know?
Well, both Max and I are Scorpios too, so we know what that's about.
Oh, good. Well, no wonder I like you so much.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's good. That's a challenge. But like I just said, that's what makes you strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why Scorpios have a very strong suicidal tendency.
Absolutely.
Because scorpions kill themselves when they're threatened. So
yes. We are ride or die, definitely. And we do have a higher tendency. But yeah. Max is not like that. He's a different Scorpio, and I'm a bit on the softer side because I have Taurus as my moon, so I kind of get balanced there. So
well, I'll have to take you to Scorpio school then to straighten that out.
Scorpio school, I love it.
Maybe that's something we should do for expansion. Scorpion school. No,
I don't think so.
No. Oh well.
All
well,
right.
To answer your question about Montauk, one thing that I never really spoke about too much is, well, maybe I did, because Janet and I wrote a book called A True Reality of Sexuality, which spoke a lot about sexual magic ritual and how the Illuminati use this to invoke lower astral entities to incorporate them in a body called a vessel in order to interact during these rituals. And so in Montauk, this was a very common thing that happened. And they would invoke very hostile entities, or what we would call demonic personalities. And the reason was, I didn't realize it then, but now I know why, is because this time, now, in this time, 2018 and on, there are 72 vortices on this planet, some natural, some artificial, that they are going to open or in the process of opening in order to create a portal for these entities to come through as part of the script for the end time programming. And by the way, Yellowstone is one of those portals. So when I see the cracks opening up, I think, here we go. They're doing something, yes? Montauk was another one of those portals, and so on. There are 72 across the earth. Again, I'll be teaching more about this in my September class. Here, what are the dates of this?
Yeah,
I
give
didn't
us
bring
that
them.
info. Oh, if you have that information, we can pass that on to our listeners.
It's on expansions.com on the website that people
All right.
can look. The details are there.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. So was there something more that you or the audience wanted to know about the Montauk Project?
We're not getting any more questions about Montauk, which I'm kind of surprised about. I think.
Well, I will say one more thing.
Yeah.
And that is, Duncan Cameron, who was the lead psychic in Montauk. He was on the Montauk chair, the famous chair. And I was one of the boys that was used as a booster to him energetically so that he could do his work. So Duncan and I have had a very strong mental bond for the last 48 years. He's probably the oldest friend I have. But unfortunately, he is very ill at the moment. He's in the hospital. And so I am asking people, and we did a podcast on this recently, and I'm asking people to please send him prayers. And can you please say what the
Financial donations as well to help with his health. He's currently in the hospital, and he's been in and out. And so he's not able to work right now. So on our Facebook pages, Stewart's and mine, as well as the Expansions fan page, we do have a place where you can click on to donate to Duncan, or you can go to his Facebook page. If you put in Duncan Cameron and go to his Facebook page, you will see his statement as well. So, and people have been very kind and generous, and they helped him get through the last month. But he still is, he still has a ways to go.
Yeah, and he feels also that he's being attacked energetically, and I know this is true because we are also attacked pretty much on a daily basis. And so I would ask people who are listening to please go to that video, to that website, and to help Duncan if you can.
And every little bit helps. If you have $5, $10, if enough people will donate that, it helps him so he can get treatments. He's also, as I said, right now, unfortunately, he's in the hospital, but he also does take alternative vitamin C treatments, and his supplements are expensive, so he's trying to do everything he can to help pull himself out, but it's been a battle.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. We send him all our well wishes. And
Thank you.
I will. Thank you.
Here.
We will
And,
appreciate it.
We send healing energy to him as well. Max and I will do that.
Thank you.
I'm sure our listeners will as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And so does he. Someone is writing in.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen lots of orange fireball-like UFOs in the sky over the years. Are these orbs or ET flying craft? What ET species could it be? Interesting question. Now, interesting answer, because first of all, there are hundreds of millions of different species that it could be. First of all, number one. The second thing is most, and I will say maybe even 90% or more, it's not actually a craft. It is holographic image from Bluebeam Project that is being tested in the atmosphere in preparation for the staged alien invasion, where the Illuminati will create the illusion of an alien invasion, hostile invasion, And then they will create a savior race that will come to chase away these aliens that are attacking. And then the savior race will proclaim that they are our ancestors who have come back to save us. And this again, I think I've mentioned this in the last show with you, and also it's in my books and my videos and my lectures always. So yes, most of what you're seeing is part of the Blue Beam project. What does it, the next question, what is needed or what does it take in order to end free energy suppression? Many inventors have been threatened or killed. Yes, absolutely they have been, and it will continue until the Illuminati are not on this planet or no longer in power.
It has to do with the mind pattern of the people, because they're suppressing their own energy. As I mentioned earlier, the strongest energy source you have is your mind, and people don't know how to use it, nor do they want to. And that is the reason why we have energy suppression on the planet, as a reflection of what people are not doing.
Yeah, and so the answer is that there already is free energy. There has been for a long time. And Nikola Tesla showed that the Earth creates the energy that you could just tap into anywhere on the Earth. And of course, this was eliminated, and so was he. So as long as they are making money from conventional utility sources, the suppression will continue.
And the people have the mind pattern for that, and that's why it's happening to start with.
Yeah, so the mind pattern is, and that's a good point Janet made. And I mentioned this, I'm sure, in the last show. Human beings as a species have a foundational mind pattern of victimization and vulnerability. And so they project this out into the physical reality, and then they attract tyrants and oppressors who do these things to them. So if you do your release work, you grow up the child within, you do your deprogramming work, you connect to the higher spiritual energies that exist, then you will remove the victimization and the vulnerability and replace it with something benevolent. And then there cannot be any suppression of free energy or anything else.
The God mind is limitless, but on this planet, the programming is to make people feel limited within themselves as a person, with what things they can have or not have. Or as I mentioned on my Save the Earth Programming podcast that I just did, we want to think, oh, you know, everything is so limited, and we have to be very careful. We can't even leave a footprint because that means you're a ghost. So you have to pay attention to the programming that is out there, and you are being indoctrinated with, and you accept without question. So that's what Stewart and I teach you to do, to question it, to read the frequency behind it, and therefore you don't fall into these traps and you don't attract the traps. And that's how the traps get broken, is by the power of your own mind.
That's correct. Yeah. So basically, you know, we talked about all these things happening on the planet, all these plans that are in process of being unraveled, and so on. And as I've mentioned many times, we can't say it's this one against that one. It's not the Illuminati against us. There are factions within factions. I mentioned last time that there's the Fourth Reich that is also involved. There are literally thousands, if not more, alien civilizations that are involved on this planet, and that is also not counting the interdimensional beings that come from elsewhere. You can't even count them because there's so many infinite realities. So it's quite a complicated situation on this world, which is why it is so, I don't want to say the word popular, but interesting to other races, because it's kind of unique in the galaxy, and maybe in most galaxies, because of all the different diversities and agendas that are in operation here. It's quite unusual.
It almost feels as if we're being set up to, I don't want to say fail, because this is the extreme learning university here,
Uh,
but it feels like the free energy and all of these things that are being suppressed is going to continue to be that way. Do you see that changing at all? Obviously, it has to be more of a global consciousness reality change.
I actually think that you hit the nail on the head when you said that people are being set up to fail.
Yes.
Because that is exactly what's happening, and people are failing, and it's only the rare person then that doesn't give up. And so that's even like Stewart and I talk about it. My philosophy is I'm going to figure out how I can. And most people are going to focus on how they can't, then they set themselves up for failure. I do everything I can to get myself into I'm going to succeed, and everything that is my block is going to become my stepping stone into what will help me succeed. It will make me strong. And if you want to attack my castle, go ahead, because you are actually doing me a favor. You're going to help me find where I'm weak, and I'm going to make it strong. And I don't think that there's a lot of that attitude out there anymore. There's a lot of what you said, that if, this is what's wrong with me, I can't do it, it's bad. And as long as we have that attitude, you are going to fail. So I think what you said actually is very appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it takes a certain tenacity for a person to just keep getting up, because you get beat, you get beaten, you get beaten, and it feels like you're getting weaker, but you're not. And that's what people have to try to overcome. You dust yourself off, you get up again.
Yeah, people are getting soft.
Do it again.
Yeah, they don't want to feel their emotions, so they take a pill. They don't want to carry extra weight. They're not supposed to have stress. You're not supposed to do anything. They're numbing your brain. They're numbing your emotions. They're numbing your ability to grow and be a person. They're numbing your connection to your source. And people are just sitting back and accepting that. And Stewart and I are saying, we're not accepting that. Look what we've been through. And if we can do it, you can do it. And it's not that we're perfect, and it's not that we're enlightened. And it's not anything. We're people just like you, with the same kind of issues, just like you. But just like what you just said, Nicole, we get up and we keep going, and we have our days and we don't want to get out of bed either. We've had enough. But, we take a deep breath and we get ourselves together and we get up and we get going and we do what we came here to do against the odds.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's very empowering in itself, just that message. Thank you.
It's interesting. Janet's father is 92 years old.
Wow.
And he's a part Cherokee. And
Waldensian.
And Waldensian, yes. And so he's very spiritual. And he connects to the Oversoul. And in fact, I don't know if you'll be able to see this this is the Oversoul symbol, is a silver infinity that you keep above your crown chakra, which is actually the interface between your personality and the God mind within. So he would get up, he says to me every morning, and he says, okay, Oversoul, what have you got for me today? And I said, look, I'm not asking that question because it's never a good answer. Like, what have you got for me today? Here's some more kick in the butt for you, okay? That's kind of how I feel on many days, because, we go on Facebook and we go on the internet and so on, and there's all kinds of trash stories about me, and I'm this and I'm not. It's like, you name the crime, I'm guilty of it. Someone accuses me of it, And so it used to bother me, and now I'm like, I don't even care, because it's like, you kind of get
immune to it,
or numb, to all these accusations.
Because that's their stuff. We don't have to take it on.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, what in my mind pattern is attracting this? Because obviously I'm attracting it. So like Janet said, it actually helped me to be attacked like this, because then I learned what is in me that is attracting this, that I need to get rid of it.
Where am I self-attacking? Because if you're self-attacking, then other people will attack you. And we're public figures. So as Stewart said, we get it all the time. And, it's learned to toughen us up and make us stronger. Mm-hmm. So as you said, the failure is, oh my God, let me run away and hide. But it's no, this is who we are. This is, they know who we are. They know what we're doing, and we don't care. We feel we're being monitored. They're watching us. They're trying to attack us. Go for it, guys. because we're used to it now. And as I said, we take this as, okay, this is like our mental gym. And we don't have to be, to pay for it. They're doing it for free. So they're helping us by attacking us.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not funny, but when I was after Montauk ended abruptly, after a few years, I was deprogrammed by government agents who were quite brutal, by the way. And at one point they said to me, because it was a very difficult procedure, and at one point they said to me, don't worry about being kidnapped by foreign agents, because you have stuff buried so deep in you that they will torture you to near death and you won't be able to answer them. I said, thank you very much, that I couldn't even save myself if I even wanted to tell them something. That's really nice of you to do that. So, it's kind of a comical situation when you hear a thing like that now. And of course, then it was kind of awful. But you know what? Over the years, and it's been many decades, I know Montauk has been over for 35 years, basically. And in that time, I have learned a lot. And through the pain and sorrow and difficulties, I have gone to the depths of my mind pattern and my emotions to see what is there. And it's not always a pretty picture to see what's inside of a person, especially your own self. And so, in a way, it was, how would you say, the most intense lesson, experience that any person can do. And I am shocked to this day that I have survived it, seriously.
But the other thing I will tell you is that people are equally afraid of the good that is inside of them. They are only comfortable as a general rule and in the status quo. And so this is why the people are being allowed, why they allow themselves to be controlled by the Illuminati, because people are afraid. One of the affirmations I give to people is to say, when you look in the mirror every morning, is, I am magnificent. I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful, I'm this, I'm that, to build up your own self-esteem, be your own cheerleader. And people don't like that,
And I grew up, Eastern European family. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but, it's all about guilt and feeling bad. And my mother would say to me, well, if you sing in the morning, you'll cry at night. So I was always afraid to be happy, because I thought, well, if I'm happy now, I'm going to be sad later. I better just be sad now. And so it won't be any different later. And so I spent my whole life in this Eastern European drama, as Janet still calls it. And it's true, because it's very, how do you say, explosive. And
it's entertaining.
Well, not really.
Yeah, it's entertaining. People who get stuck in these dramas, it's entertaining, because that's easier than dealing with yourself and who you are.
And I think that's, going back to the very beginning of the show, I think that's what the Western public does not understand about Putin and Russia, is the drama, the Eastern European drama, that to them is very normal. It's not to be deceptive or negative. It's just, that's how they are made.
Well, people would rather discuss Putin and Trump than their own life. Whether it's the bad part or the good part, if you want to label it such as that. We just look at life as experience. It's neither good nor bad. It's just what happens. And so how are you going to deal with it, and what are you going to learn from it? So we teach a more neutral observation type of perspective, because this is school. You are in school, and the soul is here to grow. So you can either fold, which it's designed to make you fold, because only the strong are going to survive, and you're going to get stronger. As I say, I'm sure other people have said it before me, what doesn't kill you makes you strong. And that's how we kind of look at our life, and that's what we teach people. We're not any different than you. We're not special. You can do what we do. It's just we figured it out in a way that works for us. If you're interested, get a membership, like us on Facebook, watch our videos, read our books. We are really here to learn about ourselves. And if you learn, hey, that's great. And we're not here to change you. We're here to change ourselves.
That's true.
Yeah, I think that's really important because there's so many distractions in the world, and everyone is looking at their electronic devices and looking at the news and looking at I mean, we talk about this all the time. I think it's a joke. Politics is a joke. The entertainment industry is a joke. Everything is a joke. There's some good stuff that's out there that leaks information, like movies. I think it's good to start putting those more positive mantras in your mind, because we're so used to putting ourselves down, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves and forgive others, because you can't clean that stuff out of yourself unless you do that. So I think
Yeah.
that's a very
Yeah.
important message.
Yeah,
The,
that's true.
the Illuminati wants you to fight with each other. It's divide and conquer, and then they can control us. And people do. If you watch that, Trump has been about fighting. Everything's about fighting. Now the politicians are fighting. And so people, then if they have suppressed anger, then what are they going to do? They're going to replicate it. Monkey see, monkey do. So they fight. And they do this and they do that. Instead of sitting at home, I mean, how many families are divided? How much is really going on between the parents and the children and the grandparents? Our family structure is divided because your internal family is divided. It's all based on programming. It's based on a lot of things. We teach multidimensional thinking because you're taught linear thinking. The God mind thinks multidimensionally. So we teach you how to think multidimensionally. We teach you how to be your own teacher, how to go within, how to connect to your source. All these things, we need to know what's out there because it's a reflection of self. It doesn't matter if it's Montauk or free energy or the sun or a mountain. It doesn't matter. Everything is a reflection of the mind pattern of the population and of you specifically. And when you learn to interpret the symbolism, you know how to teach yourself, and it's pretty amazing.
All right, cool. We were just putting your information in the chat here. So we have expansions.com. We also have Facebook, and also your YouTube at Stewart Swerdlow. We also posted Duncan Cameron's
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Facebook page in there as well. I found it and posted that in there too.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And so I know all your books can be found on expansions, and also probably a Google search and an Amazon search just with your name alone. I know there's lots of stuff in there. So
Amazon, the books are also on Kindle. And what a lot of people like to do is they buy on Kindle these days. And then if they like it, then they buy the print book. But they're pretty reasonable on Kindle, so you can get a lot of information really fast. Our membership on our website is only $26 a month. That's less than $1 a day. Stewart and I are on our blogs every single day helping people. This month, my blog is called Release the Fight. And I can't even remember what the affirmation blog is, but I have one every day that goes up there. We have great people from all over the world that participate, that communicate with each other. Stuart's got his blogs going all the time. And so we help our people every day. We are there. We are a support system for those who want to learn the hyperspace oversoul way.
Yeah, and while there's just a couple of minutes I know left, I again remind everyone for the September class, which I believe is September 10 to 14. But the last weekend in September, I'm doing a special class in Tampa, Florida, for the organization I belong to, the Sacred Medical Order of the Knights of Hope, which is it's for doctors of alternative medicine, and they'll be giving, but this class is open to anyone.
It's open to the public.
It's open to the public, although our meeting that weekend is for the doctors to be there. And then at the end of October, I will be a speaker and a panelist at the
Stargate to the Cosmos in
Albuquerque,
New Mexico.
And that's at the Ghana site as well.
It's supposed to be.
Yes.
We had a little glitch, but it will be up very soon if it's not up now. It's on Facebook. I always encourage people, like our Facebook page, Expansions Facebook page, because everything will circulate through there and you won't miss out on anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then of course our January class, which we do every year.
Yeah, and that's our biggest class, so our most intensive, I should say.
But I will say that this September class for me is the most intense right now, because I'm giving deciphering over 4,000 pages of very ancient information from Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Syriac, Greek, Latin. Amazing, intense stuff I've never taught before.
And whatever we teach, what we do is we tell you the reflection so you can utilize that for yourself, because that is our goal, is so you are your own teacher. And that's what makes us completely different than anybody, at least I found so far, is most people want you to keep going back to them. We just tell you, we are just here to guide you to connect your own source, to do what you're already doing and be able to label that. You'd be surprised at how many people will say to me, well, I didn't get anything. Well, what did you get? Well, I got blah, blah. And I go, okay, let's take a look at that. You did get something and you can move with that. This is good stuff. So we look at what you are already doing, and it's amazing what people can do once they get that little bit of self-confidence and somebody to say, hey, look, you can do this. And they go. We have great people with a lot of amazing things.
On every continent.
Yeah.
Yes.
People who started new businesses are able to buy a home, they get relationships, and they're doing it themselves.
That's amazing. Thank you for that information. So you supply the tools so that people can empower themselves instead of looking for it outside of themselves. So I think that's a very important message. Right now, I just want to say thank you to our guests tonight. I want to say a big thank you to our listeners on Wolf Spirit Radio. And also, this is a listener-supported radio station, so please donate. Also, on Max 21D, if you want to help support Max, and he's making the Arcturian box right now, and he can always use some support, either financially or emotionally or spiritually, whatever he needs. Just contact him through his website. That's max21d.com. And Max, what did you want to say? You just had a vision here of 3 people that went missing. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, Stewart was talking about going to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had a vision of 3 people going missing after that gathering. I saw that.
Hopefully, I'm not one of them.
No, you're not. Neither is Janet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they're going to be beamed up.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting to get beamed up.
Maybe they're going to get ascended. Who knows?
Yeah. Only if there's an escalator in the hotel.
I want to say something too. My friend Stephen Huey from Cordell, Georgia, came here, staying here for a week with me. And I want to thank him for coming here to help me with the Arcturian box. And he's been an awesome, great help. So if there's any more people out there that want to help, I really appreciate that. I do have a problem with my hands, which I'm doing exercise now with these clays that the Veterans Hospital gave me when I was there for 10 days. I just got to tell folks, I didn't talk very much today because I don't feel very well yet. I feel very tired, and I wake up a lot in the middle of the night, and I'm just going through some changes of my own. You got to understand that we are all going through changes. So be aware of that. And always stay in the light, go in the path of love, surround yourself with love, and send love to others. Thank you for being on the show, Stewart and Janet, and thank you so very much. Thank you, Russ, my wife, Nicole, Vanessa, Little Pony was here earlier, and I want to thank Q1on that's here with us. He didn't say much, but I thank him also for all the good things that he's doing. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Max.
Bye.
Bye-bye.